You gotta get your game face on. Hey, I am Chuck the bureaucrat, and recently I've started to notice a pattern in the way that military people, like retirees or prior service folks, in how they represent themselves in interviews. For some reason, I keep getting dragged along to interviews to ask the technical questions. So I'm just sitting through the intro, the tell us about yourself part, the hypothetical questions about if you had a difficult boss. My part comes about 2/3 of the way through the interview. And so I get a good look at the person before the technical questions and after. Now, here is the pattern. The person has a great resume. They're punctual, they're professional, and then they do awful on that first tell us about yourself question. They seem confused and hesitant, scared. And as they're going through the first half of the interview, they seem like they can't get their words right. And then I do the technical stuff. You know, the kind of things you deal with around the office. Issues that they've dealt with in the past, not softball questions by any means. And after these questions, what surprises me is how confident and self-assured so many of these people are in the rest of the interview. We have made a lot of offers because the second half of the interview went well, even when the first half didn't go so good. So why is it that the first half of these interviews with military people go so poorly? And how can you do this more effectively? I mean, after all, first impressions do matter, and I'm pretty sure that somewhere out there, prior service military people are getting passed over because they just don't make the right first impression. Well, here's what I've noticed. A lot of people have been on terminal leave for a long time before this interview. Or they've had a break. They've taken time to go deal with some personal business. But either way, they've been back home for a while. And I think it's being back home that causes this phenomenon. I mean, first of all, it doesn't matter where you're from. You have a regional way of talking. It doesn't matter if you're from Brooklyn or Atlanta or Laredo. You go back there and you pick the accent back up. And then most of the issues that you're going to deal with when you're back home, they're more kitchen table issues than they are matters of national security. Help mom move, close out some bank accounts, clean out the house, those kinds of things. They're important life matters, but they're not the kinds of things that you dealt with when you were in uniform. And then you do an interview with a panel of people back at the Pentagon who were fully engaged in the matters of the day. They're talking the talk, they're thinking about the next 50-meter target. There's a gap between where their head is and where your head's at. And part of the reason I say this is because I have seen so many people who they start out and they're real fuzzy, but by the time they're answering those technical questions, that razor-sharp warrior has shown up to the interview. So how do you fix this? Well, I think it's pretty easy once you understand what the issue is. What you want to do is you want to put your game face on, that mental mindset that you have while you're wearing the uniform. And one of the best ways to do this is just to have a conversation with one of your friends who's still working in your old environment. Let's say you're a retired military helicopter mechanic, and you and your brother have just wrapped up a 3-week RV trip through Canada. And now you're getting ready to interview for a helicopter maintenance job at a base close to where you grew up. Before you do that interview, call one of your buddies who's still working on helicopters. Talk shop, discuss parts and inspections and policy and upcoming exercises. Ideally, you're going back and forth. You and your buddy are both talking shop. And as an added bonus, I would recommend picking a buddy who is not from the same part of the country as you. You don't want them to hear your accent and drop into it themselves. Instead, you want them to pull you back towards that non-regional dialect that so many military people use. Personally, I would schedule this conversation with your buddy for a couple of hours before the interview. I'd get my head in the game, and then I'd stay in the game until the interview was over. And now, if you want to see the manuals that are used to write the job descriptions for government employees, I mean, the exact words, watch this video.